Hey folks, welcome back. My name is Cyrus Davis. Today I have another tier list video for you on the Surging Sparks format. I did one of these before we had any major events in the format so far. So now I just want to do a little update, sort of talk about what I was wrong about, what the results have looked like up to this point, and what I expect the results to look like going forward, or just how, in general, how strong I think decks are currently. There's some things that maybe results would show that weren't super accurate about my original tier list that I might still stand by, and some things that I might feel corrected on. Things like Klawf have really changed significantly. Klawf is a very different deck than it was when I made that original tier list now. So there's definitely stuff to talk about here. So let's start by taking a look at my original tier list for comparison. This is what my initial predictions for the format were. And this is based on the limitlesscg.com data, what, objectively the results have been so far, based on how many points that they have earned on Limitless. So, Regidrago had over 1,000 points, significantly more than Charizard, about 400 point difference, securing it safely in S tier. And then the gap between Charizard and everything in tier 2 is also very high. Charizard, I think, had 800-ish, and everything else had around 300 or less. So Charizard, I'd say, is the only deck really up there competing with Regidrago right now for that best deck in the format spot. With the gap that these two decks have above everything else, I think it's fair to say Regidrago S tier, Charizard the only tier 1 deck, because it's the deck that most consistently keeps up with Regidrago and has good matchups and other things. But of course, a lot of these other decks are also very good. In tier 2, we have Klawf, a deck that moved up a little bit from where I had it before, but mostly just because of its sort of change, the discovery of the Terapagos variant that was not discovered yet when I made my original tier list video. Snorlax up there as well. A lot of these decks are going to have been bumped down a tier just because I, put only Charizard in tier 1. But Snorlax, as I predicted, in sort of that very high up range, the upper echelon of decks, generally speaking. Raging Bolt, a deck that I don't think necessarily should be this high. I still kind of stand by that it probably shouldn't be, but it's just a very popular deck, and it has a good Regidrago matchup, so that kind of carries it. Gardevoir, another deck that I predicted to be up here. Dragapult a little bit higher than I predicted. I didn't expect it to be quite up there with the other decks, but I think the Iron Thorns variant has proved to be a lot more successful than I anticipated. I don't even know if that was really going around when I made the original tier list, but even if it was, I wasn't really respecting that build when it was first discovered. And then Lugia, I expected to be significantly higher, but Lugia has completely dropped off in the Surging Sparks format so far. There are still players that are doing very well with it, and I think it's pretty underrated, but definitely has not seen the results that I expected it to. And then Gholdengo has been way better than I expected it to be. I've had it down in tier 3. It's sort of in that top 10 deck range. I probably, I honestly, I probably thought that tier 3 was relatively generous when I made my original tier list, but it has had a lot more success in this format than it did in the previous one. Lost Box, about where I expected, maybe a little bit lower. I think it had a lot of hype behind it at first, and it's still putting up some decent results, but its bad Drago matchup is just really weighing it down. Roaring Moon, much higher than I expected. I expected to be in tier 4, just not super playable at all. But I mean, a lot of people playing Roaring Moon in tournaments right now. I don't know if I think that it's necessarily that great, but definitely is putting up some results. Hasn't made a top 8 yet, I don't think. So still looking to actually prove that it's genuinely good in this format, but people are definitely playing it and people are definitely doing pretty well with it. Then in tier 3, we have Terapagos, which way lower than I thought it would be. I think that I underestimated, and I think a lot of players underestimated, how much of an impact the Alolan Exeggutor EX would have on that matchup, allowing Regidrago to more consistently take 2 prize knockouts against the Terapagos player. The Alolan Exeggutor, honestly, has just been such a huge swing for Regidrago in general. And I think that is why that Terapagos has been pushed down so much farther than I expected it to be. Ancient Box a little bit higher than I expected. I think just sort of capitalizing on the good Regidrago matchup and good Klawf matchup primarily. Also, if you'll be able to Petron, has a pretty good Snorlax matchup as well. So it's just sort of capitalizing on a good metagame for it right now. And I think that it probably does deserve to be a little bit higher than I originally rated it. Because especially with the addition of Klawf into like one of the top decks in the format, Ancient taking such a good matchup with that is a huge perk. Next, we have Pidgeot Control and Miraidon down here in Tier 3, and I think these two are sort of the odd ones out. Miraidon is about where I predicted it would be. However, it did end up, coming first and second at Sacramento, so I'm actually surprised it was even this low on the Limitless results, just based on that, but I guess it just has not done a lot outside of coming first and second at Sacramento. Not a lot of people picking it up. Not a ton of it around. It's definitely represented, but not as much as you'd expect from a deck that came first and second at the first event of this format. So it's not enough people playing to get it up there. I think it's probably maybe even a little bit better than this, but I mean, that is where I predicted it would be, and I still kind of think that's about right. Still not the greatest deck in the world. But Pidgeot Control, on the other hand, did make a top 8 this season. I had it in S tier. I actually think I probably was a little bit off. I'd maybe bring it down one tier. I mean, as many viewers here know, I played Snorlax to Toronto, so if I thought Pidgeot Control was S tier, I probably still would have went with that. But I think that I would have to bump it down a little bit from what my initial predictions were early on in the format. And instead bring it down to maybe tier 2. However, tier 3 definitely is mostly just representative of how few people actually play the deck more than how good it is. You could say that about a lot of sort of niche decks, but I think Pidgeot Control is the prime example of that, where very, very, this is an incredibly niche deck that always does super well in the hands of good players. Then we have sort of the leftovers. Archaludon, a deck that I thought was going to be in tier 4. It's pretty low down here. Iron Thorns, another deck that, about where I expected. Is doing okay, is floating around. Same with Corner. I think that I put Corner in tier 2. That's another deck that has been hurt hugely by how much Alolan Exeggutor EX is in Regidrago. That tech in Drago just sort of rolls over Cornerstone decks left and right. And that was sort of... having a decent Drago matchup was why I had Corner as high as I did at the time. So that definitely I was wrong about. I, once again, just sort of not expecting as much Alolan Exeggutor action as we ended up getting. Palkia Terapagos, I expected to be a little bit higher just because a lot of good players were playing it going in at the end of last format, and we're doing okay into Drago with it. But it seemed to have fallen off pretty hard at this point. Doesn't have a great Charizard matchup, especially from what I've been told from the people that have played it a lot. So yeah, it's not getting a lot of play. It's fairly mediocre, sitting down here in tier 3. Gouging Fire, another deck. It's around, but not doing super well. Palkia Dusknoir has basically, had that still in tier 1, but it just kind of gets eviscerated by Drago. I think it probably is better than this, but where it is on this sheet, just barely above Chien Pao, Hydreigon, that's definitely way too low for it. People just aren't playing enough. However, I don't think it's up here. This is way too high as well. In tier 4, we have just sort of, and then the last tier, which is decks that got one top 256 finish. This is just sort of the best of the rest. Banette I had all the way up here in tier 1. Latias EX is something that I did not consider enough how much it would hurt Banette Gardevoir. That deck has completely fallen off because of that. Hydreigon, not doing as well as I had hoped. Same with Ceruledge, which I also had decently up here. So a few of my predictions gone terribly wrong over here. Nobody's really playing these decks, so I think that Tord played Hydreigon to the most recent to Toronto. So clearly he thought it was pretty solid too. I think that both Hydreigon and Banette and Ceruledge honestly could all move up a little bit probably. But people just aren't really playing them, and they are definitely not up here with these decks. So yeah, this is just sort of the fringe decks that have been around, and we'll talk maybe a little bit more about them if I feel like it when we actually make our new updated tier list. So let's just get right into it then. That's sort of, what has happened with, actually we're missing a couple decks here. These decks also had a couple of niche finishes. We had Greninja and United Wings. But yeah, with that update and sort of talking about what I had right and wrong with my predictions, let's see what we think going forward. Because I don't think that this is completely accurate. I think that there were definitely a lot of stuff that I got wrong here. Let's mix and mash, and what did I get right? What did I get wrong? What do I still feel like is going to do well for the next few events? I think our next one is going to be San Antonio, and we'll have a couple more events in this format still. So we'll start with Gardevoir. I'm going to put Gardevoir up in Tier 2. I think that it is probably the best deck that doesn't have a great Regidrago matchup. It definitely can beat Regidrago. It's decent, but Regidrago definitely is favored into it, and so can't justify it putting it higher than Tier 2, really. We'll go ahead and put Drago right up into S Tier just because that's easy. Drago is obviously the best deck in the format. Obviously, S Tier, it can beat anything. It has a few unfavorable matchups, and those will mostly be what is filling out Tier 1. But generally speaking, it is just completely dominant. Snorlax, I'm going to put up there in Tier 1. I think that it's one of the only decks with a favorable Regidrago matchup. I think the matchup's still close, but it's at least favored, and it kind of just rolls over everything, like almost everything else. It has a few bad matchups, but they're like not that popular. Snorlax beats most things pretty handily. It's my number one play still for major tournaments coming up if I had any, and I think it should be yours too. Banette, gonna put down here in Tier 4. I definitely was wrong about Banette's viability. Latias has sort of crushed Banette's hopes and dreams. It just sort of gets farmed in this format. I think that, there's maybe a little bit, you can keep tinkering with it and maybe make a little bit of leeway, but I just don't think that looks good right now. We'll put Charizard up here in Tier 1 as well. I think that Charizard is fairly solid. It can keep up with Regidrago. It's good into a lot of other stuff. It has, play into every matchup. There's no matchups where it's, completely walled out. So, I guess I said Guardy was the best deck that's unfavored to Regidrago. It's probably Charizard. I don't really think of it as quite the same because I feel like Charizard maybe is closer to 50-50 with Drago than Gardevoir is, but it's still not... you still don't really want to hit Drago. Palkia, Terapagos, I think I'll put in Tier 4. I just don't really see any reason to playing the deck right now. It seems like the general community agrees. Conkeldurr, I think, is terrible as well. It doesn't have a good Drago matchup, and it's such a fringe deck. I don't think there's much merit there. Klawf, however, with Klawf Terapagos popping off, I think is Tier 1. I think it has a favorable Drago matchup. It has favorable matchups into a lot of things. It has a lot of win conditions. You can donk people. You can, swing with multiple different... You can go the one prize route, or you can just go big knockouts with Terapagos. So I like how versatile it is. I think it has a lot of options. I think that donking your opponent is a really silly way to win quick games. It's also just very quick in general, so you are usually going to be able to finish 3 games. It has, win cons into control decks. So it's just very, very well-rounded deck. I think that Klawf Terapagos is Tier 1 and here to stay. Raging Bolt, I still think is mid, but I think I'm actually going to bring it up in Tier 2. This is maybe the highest I've ever spoken of Raging Bolt. I think that, there's merit to a deck that's just fast and consistently beats Regidrago. Obviously, Drago can still beat it, but Raging Bolt is definitely favored, and I think that any deck that is favored into Regidrago has a place in this format with, even if it's only 13% day 1, Regidrago usually, 20% day 2 is crazy. 1 in 5 chance of defending Drago every single round. I think that playing decks that are favored into Drago is just a good idea, Hot take. And there aren't that many of them. Raging Bolt is really one of the only decks that consistently beats Drago, so... United Wings, terrible. Even if it got a day 2, it still not very good. Same with Toedscruel, same with the Bloodmoon, Ursaluna Iron Valiant deck. Same with, I'll put Regis in tier 4, maybe. I think probably below Conkeldurr. Like, the Regidrago Pikachu EX deck is definitely cool. Definitely has some play and some decent matchups. But is generally just not very consistent. Not super good. I'm going to put Dragapult in tier 2. I've actually come around a bit on the Iron Thorns build of the deck. I think that having Iron Thorns to slow down, like Regidrago and Charizards, really early, often can win you those matchups once you start swinging with Dragapult later on. Just basically getting a few prize head start usually in those matchups while you set up your Dragapults on the bench is very, very solid. Asian Box, I think I'm going to put in tier 3. Moving it up a little bit from my initial predictions, I think that it does have good matchups against Drago, Klawf, with Petra and Snorlax. So, the fact that it's, just looking at my top 3 here, has good matchups into all 3 of those. Also, good matchup into Bolt and Guardy. Definitely struggles with Charizard and Dragapult still, but you can, potentially dodge those. I wouldn't play Ancient Box to a major right now, but, it definitely has a lot of solid matchups against some top tier decks. It just also has a lot of bad matchups. Cornerstone, I'm going to put in tier 4, but top of tier 4, I think it just doesn't beat Drago anymore, and if it doesn't beat Drago, I don't think there's a lot of reason to play it. There's so many different ways to build this deck. You can build with the Milotic, with the Noivern, but no matter what, it's hard to beat Drago. It's hard to beat Dragapult as well. Gardevoir is tough to beat, so even Klawf is very, very tough to beat. Just not enough good matchups right now. Lost Box, I'm probably going to put in tier 2. I think it's a little bit underrated right now. I think that it definitely has a bad Drago matchup, but there is some more counterplay there with the Pikachu EX now, and it has great matchups into other stuff. So, it's good in the Raging Bolt. I think it's solid in the Gardevoir, solid in the Charizard, definitely good in the Klawf. So I think the deck's still solid. It's also just a very good deck in general. Has a lot of options. You can squeeze out wins where you with some decks that are more linear, you can't necessarily. Palkia Dusknoir, like I said, I think it's better than it's been performing so far. I'm going to put it in tier 3 just because I do think the Dragon matchup's pretty bad. Actually, no, I'm going to put it up in tier 2. I think Palkia Dusknoir is fairly solid. I think that you have some tough matchups against top tiers, but you farm Charizard still. You can beat Drago. Your Bolt matchup's pretty good. Your Gardevoir matchup's really good. Your Dragapult matchup, I think, probably a lot weaker now that they have Iron Thorns, but still should be okay. So yeah, I think Palkia Dusknoir are definitely still pretty solid. Miraidon, I think I am just gonna leave it in tier 3. Like I had it originally. I think that, it did have a big pop-off event, but its Drago matchup really isn't that good. I think that someone misplayed against it. I believe Johnning, could have beat it on stream, but made a mistake. And I think that stuff like that is just, people weren't playing Miraidon enough. Maybe people were a little rusty against it, and I think that now its time is sort of over, and we're not going to see it winning another major in this format. Chien Pao, it's going to go in tier 4. It definitely still a deck that can win games. Has a good Charizard matchup. Actually, I'm probably going to put it in terrible. I was saying tier 4, but it doesn't beat Klawf either. It doesn't beat Gardevoir. It doesn't beat Dragapult. Doesn't beat Snorlax or Regidrago. Barely beats Charizard. Doesn't beat Lost Box. So, yeah, it's just don't think it's very good. Gholdengo, I know it's been doing pretty well lately, but it's going to go into tier 3. It's just not the most consistent deck, and it's not very versatile either. You can play with the Radiant Greninja, and I think that is the way to go. It gives you a lot stronger options, but it still is, it has a slightly favorable Drago matchup. Maybe I'll even put it in bottom tier 2 just because it has a slightly favorable Drago matchup. We'll put it above Palkia Dusknoir. But it's just generally not that good of a deck. I think that it can beat a lot of stuff, especially if people don't know how to play against it. But I think that Charizard should usually beat it, Klawf should usually beat it, Snorlax should usually beat it. Honestly, all 5 these top 5 decks right here, other than the Drago, should probably beat it more often than not. Lugia we'll put up here. I'm still gonna be winning it in tier 1. I think that it is. It has good matchup against everything above it, so that's in and of itself sort of telling as to why it should be up here in tier 1. People are just really aren't playing it enough. He had a huge fall off after the Miraidon only finals, but I trust if the good Lugia players keep playing it, they will keep doing well, like Rahul and Kieran. Hydreigon is going to go down here in tier 3. I think it's still underrated. I think it has a lot of good matchups, but definitely is unfavorable in the Regidrago, which isn't ideal. Pitch Control is going to go up here in tier 1. I was a little bit doubting it for a little bit. Maybe would have had it around here. But I think I'm putting it back up here after its top 8 at Toronto. That list has felt really good to me too, so revigorated my confidence in it. I think that it still has some issues. Its Drago matchup is favorable, but not incredibly consistent. Its Klawf matchup, it can be a little bit inconsistent as well. Charizard matchup, obviously doesn't have a good Lugia matchup. Doesn't have a very good Pult Thorns matchup. Gardevoir can be pretty tricky as well. So I think there are definitely still some issues, but the deck is very, very good right now. Archaludon, that's going to go top of tier 4. It actually does have a decent Drago matchup, but it kind of gets farmed by everything else. And I don't think it beats Drago consistently enough to be like any higher than this. The deck just kind of sucks. It doesn't have a lot of options. It's very linear, and it's not very consistent either. So, Roaring Moon, also going to go in tier 4, but top of tier 4. Obviously, this has been doing fairly well recently, but I honestly cannot explain why people are all picking it up and playing it. It beats Snorlax, decent into Pidgeot Control, but like it gets rolled by Zard. It doesn't consistently beat Regidrago, but I mean maybe Roaring Moon players think it does, and that's why it's seeing so much play. It doesn't really beat Klawf. It definitely like does from time to time, and it seems like honestly, it seems like it's had a pretty good win rate in the Klawf, generally speaking, but I think that Klawf is still favored personally. Lugia matchup's not good. Yeah, Gardevoir matchup's not good. I mean, can struggle against early game Iron Thorns. Yeah, I just don't think it's very well positioned at all. Greninja EX is going to go in the terrible tier. I don't know where to sort this in, but it's going to go somewhere in there. It's just not really a viable deck. Great Tusk, Azumarill, and Lost Pika. This Lost Pika, all Lost Box variants are covered in the Lost Box here, so I'm not going to add that. And then Great Tusk and Azumarill aren't real decks, so I'm not going to go over those either. But Terapagos, we'll put in tier 3. I actually do think that the Dragon matchup is a lot worse than it was before. The Charizard matchup's not good either. The Klawf matchup's pretty shaky. Lugia is probably your best matchup of the top tiers here. But, I mean, having a bad Charizard and Drago matchup is just not where you want to be in the current format. It's a really good deck, which is why it's still up here in tier 3. It's just a generally good deck, but you can't be losing to Drago and Zard. Iron Thorns, tier 3. I think probably even top of tier 3. Maybe even up to tier 2, but I think it's going to stay here. The Drago matchup is pretty solid. I think that it won Worlds for when Drago was at its most popular for a reason. I think that the Klawf matchup's pretty good. The Charizard matchup's really good. There's more people teching for it right now than ever before, I think. Not even intentionally, but there's just a lot of Charizard lists that have Cologne just in them, just cuz. Partially for Thorns, but also for other things. So I think that like Iron Thorns is a little bit awkwardly positioned. You also you have to play Canceling Clone of your own, otherwise you're unfavored into like Snorlax and Pidge. Anything with Mimikyu. So I think the better way to play Iron Thorns right now probably is just the Dragapult build. But Iron Thorns is definitely still pretty well positioned. It has a lot of good matchups against top tiers. Obviously farms Lugia. So yeah, definitely just a good safe deck right now. I think that if you play this through a regional, like more often than not, you will hit enough good matchups in day 1 to just coast to day 2. Giratina gonna go in the terrible tier, but we'll put it like at the top. It definitely still it's still a deck that works, but doesn't have a good Dragon matchup. Doesn't have a good Zard matchup unless you play the Iron Leaves, in which case it can be a little bit inconsistent. Lugia matchup's still bad. Dragapult matchup's still bad. Gardevoir matchup is kind of shaky. Ringable matchup I think is good, but Lost Rock matchup's bad. Gholdengo matchup's bad. So yeah, just not a lot of good matchups. But it did make day 2 at Toronto. Gouging Fire, it's still around, but I think I'm just gonna put it. It's okay in the Drago. I think I'll just put it in tier 4. I know there's a lot of Gouging Fire fans in there, and they're gonna be mad at me. But I don't think the deck's very good. I don't think it does a lot that any of the other 2-prize heavy decks like Miraidon, Raging Bolt, or Roaring Moon can do. I understand that it has a lot of interesting cards in it. It has the Conkeldurr, the Fluttermane, a lot of cute little tools, but I think that ultimately it does not beat many matchups that these decks don't already. Ceruledge is going to go right here. I think it's still better than Archaludon. I maybe even put it up here. I think that... No, I'll put it here. Because it has seen some play and it has not. It's only on one day too so far. I think that the Briar does add a lot to this deck still, and I don't think it's that much worse than Gholdengo. But I think, the Gholdengo has room for, like, Togekiss at least, and the Energy Search Pro has made Gholdengo's turn 2 knockout really, really consistent. Gholdengo doesn't have to bench as many 2-prizers, not as reliant on them, so all of those things bump Ceruledge down pretty significantly. I think that the deck just hasn't been functioning as well as it should have. I haven't played the deck a ton since the start of the format because I've been focused on other decks as I prepped for Toronto Regionals, but maybe the deck still has legs, and people just aren't playing consistent enough lists right now. A lot of the time, like, when not a lot of top players pick up a deck, it's just inherently not going to do well, no matter how good it might be. And right now, I'm going to concede that maybe Ceruledge just isn't it, and it should be down here in tier 4, but maybe someday it'll rise again. We'll see the return of Ceruledge to getting some hype. That is all of the decks I'm going to talk about. These ones are not real, this one's already on there, basically. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I hope that this tier list helps you make your deck decisions for your upcoming events. If you're playing a deck that's lower on the tier list, I don't think that's a problem. I think that realistically anything tier 4 or above, like if you're just playing like local events and stuff like that, you can do well with. And if you play the decks that you like, but these are what I think is best. I would probably not recommend any deck below tier 1 for major events. Personally, I know that I would be considering only these 6 decks for major tournaments if I had one coming up. Right now, I'd probably be leaning towards Snorlax still, but Pidgeot Control and Klawf both are very, very good as well. I'm not someone who would really want to play a bunch of Drago Mirrors all weekend, but if you're comfortable with Regidrago, that is definitely a good option as well. It's just a safe choice. If you tell me what you agree with, tell me what you disagree with. Please be nice, or don't if you can't. But I might not. I probably won't respond to your comment if you're not nice. If you want to check out any of my other content or my socials, my link tree is in the description below. Have a great day.